glass and wood. Two textures that are not so easy to paint. If that sounds familiar, you're in the right place. In this video, we'll paint lively glass reflections on the windows and focus on capturing the feeling of wood rather than painting its texture literally. You'll learn how to shape reflections with abstract patches, leave those beautiful artistic gaps, capture the rhythm of the wood, and use alpha lock as a smart way to adjust tones. This is the fourth video in the series, The Wooden Door with Floral Accents, where we are drawing in Procreate with digital markers. Here we explore techniques that make digital strokes feel like real markers, the kind of details you rarely see in standard tutorials. Subscribe to join our creative space where marker lovers meet. The link to the marker brushes we are using in every lesson is in the description, and all previous videos are already waiting for you on my channel. Before moving on to the wooden door, let's focus on the windows. They need soft, organic strokes, so this is where brush number 1 really helps. If you look closely, you'll notice grayish tones mixed with hints of orange and pink. The goal isn't to copy them exactly, but to borrow the idea of those colors. Just look for something similar in your palette and avoid overcomplicating it with too many colors. You can choose a warm gray and lay down some light vertical strokes, or get a bit creative and play with contrast. Add cooler shades to balance the warm gray in the windows and the yellow wall. A soft gray lavender tone fits in perfectly. Place the strokes following the same direction as in the reference. Control the color density and add dark tones when you need more depth. For finer elements, like the border between the frame and the glass, switch to a smaller brush size. Simple abstract shapes, like the glass reflections, can sometimes feel tricky to paint. There are no clear forms to follow. It's more about working intuitively, trying to capture the overall character of the spots. Gradually, the palette shifts from grays and purples to warm hues. If you reduce the pressure, the color will look softer and less saturated. Always pause and check the overall view of your work. If the color jumps out too much, keep just a couple of light touches in the reflections and choose a shade that fits in more smoothly. Feel free to experiment with color. Let's try another shade from the Earth Tones palette. If you paint with lighter pressure, the color will blend in more softly and create a more subtle, nuanced look. For shadow areas, choose a darker tone. It might not seem like the most obvious choice right now, especially since the wooden door isn't painted yet. But once it appears, this color will tie the abstract glass reflections and the door tones together perfectly. Add a darker warm gray to gently deepen the tone of the glass. The strokes can vary. Try to make them different in shape, size, and direction to create a more interesting mosaic effect. Let's keep the window at this stage for now. Once the door tone comes in, it may change the overall look. Create a new layer for the door and switch to the broad tip brush. Drawing on a separate layer gives you more flexibility. You can always adjust the color intensity. The base tone of the door is up to you. It can be more neutral or slightly warmer. Start with quick shape and quickly fill the surface of the door, leaving space for the central section. It will form on its own, and later you'll see how. The main task right now is to carefully define the edges of both door panels. It's a good idea to use quick shape in places where clean geometry matters, and the edge of the door is exactly one of those cases. Here, the overlapping strokes actually work in your favor. The wood texture is complex and varied, and those patchy, layered strokes help capture its character. You can follow the shape of each surface with your strokes, horizontal strokes for horizontal planes and vertical ones for vertical areas. And you can leave some small, uncolored areas, like this little strip that appeared between the door and the window. They work as a nice artistic touch. Next, move on to the window frame. As you may remember from the previous lessons, it's easier to draw curved lines in small segments. Use fast, confident strokes and fill in the smaller parts. For parts where the lines need to stay straight, use Quick Shape tool. Rotate the canvas if needed for a more natural hand movement. Each time you go over the same spot, the stroke becomes denser. As mentioned in the first video, the Phantom brush works great for small details. Use it together with Quick Shape to form the central element of the door. The line might not come out right for the first time, so repeat it until you get the result you want. It's important to leave two unpainted strips on both sides. That's what creates the sense of volume in the central panel. There is no need to emphasize highlights at the top. They will matter more in the lower part. Go ahead and cover any remaining white gaps now, so you don't have to come back to them later. For clean edges, use Quick Shape to emphasize the door's geometry and its contrast with the lighter frame. The base fill for the door is ready. Thanks to the overlapping strokes, it already has a patchy look that resembles wooden texture. You can keep working with the broad tip or switch to the brush number 1. Pick a darker shade and see how it works with the existing color. Lay the strokes vertically to emphasize the direction of the wood grain, but don't overwork the details. The goal here is just to add some texture variety. Adjust the brush size when working in narrow areas. Add a few light horizontal strokes on the rectangular sections. The reason for keeping the door on a separate layer is that you can now turn on Alpha Lock. Just swipe right with 2 fingers to enable it. Increase the brush size. It will make filling larger areas easier. Now you can darken the door without worrying about edges. Alpha Lock keeps everything inside the painted pixels. In other words, you're recoloring the door while keeping all the texture. The reference shows a subtle gradient running from top to bottom, so you can darken the lower third of the door a bit. Choose a deeper color for that and gently darken the upper section too, especially in the shadowed area, to strengthen the feeling of depth. Make the brush smaller and carefully darken the edges of the doorway. These small moves create a nice depth effect. Add a few lines to define the rectangular elements of the door. It's time to turn off Alpha Lock. It limits your ability to paint with full opacity. If needed, reduce the brush size again and add deeper shadows to the rectangular sections. When working on details like these, avoid making the outlines too sharp or rigid. Let the lines stay loose with small gaps and a bit of imperfection. Those little irregularities and strokes that cross the outline are what give the drawing its authentic marker feel. When working with real markers, those little marks can be erased, and that's what makes the artwork feel alive. Fix any asymmetry as you go. At this stage, you can switch back to the broad tip brush, set it to a smaller size, pick up the dark color again, and start building the vertical wood grain texture. The level of texture you add here is completely up to you. In traditional marker sketching, we can zoom in to work on tiny details. So if you want to stay true to the marker technique, try not to overwork the textures. Focus on keeping the overall balance. The strokes in the lower part already create a nice effect. If some parts turned out nicely but don't exactly match the reference, it's often better to keep your version rather than force it to look identical to the photo. In these spots, the tone is darker, so you can deepen it a bit more. When adding new elements, go in small steps and keep zooming out to check the overall look. If a stroke comes out too dark, just ease up on the pressure. At this point, the gradient has become barely visible, so turn Alpha Lock back on, grab the brush number 1, pick a slightly darker tone, and go over the shadow areas again. The upper part of the door has the darkest cast shadow from the frame, so deepen that area a bit more. For softer ends, move your hand in one smooth motion, press down firmly at first, and lift off lightly to blend it out. Add some contrast to the edge between the door and the light frame. It's easy to get carried away with the details, so let's start wrapping this up. The main wood texture is already defined. Now softly highlight the points where the rectangular panel contours cross the wood grain. Start the line with firm pressure and release it gradually so the line fades naturally. Just be careful not to overdo it. On the horizontal areas, you can add a few light lines to suggest the wood grain, just a couple of quick strokes. Using the brush number 1 at a smaller size and a lighter pressure will give you soft, natural strokes. Use darker lines to emphasize the subtle shadows at the top. Outline the outer edges of the panels. The inner details can be added later on a separate layer, so you'll be able to adjust them without affecting what's already done. You can add a few small dots to enhance the details and draw attention to the texture. Now the door surface looks finished. Even though we never actually painted the wood texture, it still feels wooden, that subtle illusion built from overlapping strokes and abstract patches. Do you like this kind of approach when texture is felt rather than drawn? Tell me in the comments. And if you have any questions about today's process, I'll be happy to answer them there. In the next video, we'll move on to the wall elements and explore how to paint gray objects without using gray colors. You'll see how subtle shifts in tone can make even neutral areas appear rich and nuanced. Subscribe to keep learning the art of digital marker illustration together. See you in the next video.